Hello, YouTube. Wanted to come on tonight, and it's been a while since I've done a video where I actually did not just do a voiceover, but I wanted to come on tonight because I've been really going through in my mind recently the different things that God has brought me through, just thinking back even to my teenage years. And I wanted to come on because I wanted to talk to you guys about pain, purpose, destiny, and favor. Pain, purpose, destiny, and favor. So I want to give you a little bit of my story, or it may be a lot of my story. At the tender age of 15, I graduated high school. And to my surprise, because we had been planning otherwise, when I say we, I'm talking about my parents and I had been planning for me to go to the local college. Those of you who have watched my videos before or who know me, you know that I am originally from the Bahamas. I was born and mostly raised in Nassau. Well, at the tender age of 15, I graduated high school, and to my surprise, I learned that I would be going off to college to come here in the United States to go to a small city called Selma, Alabama. And in Selma, Alabama, I attended university, a small 2-year college called Selma University. So at 15, I leave home just as green as the grass, didn't know anything about life, didn't know anything about anything really. I was definitely a really good student, so I had my good schooling behind me, but everything else I was pretty much green to. So I met a young man in college. He's a basketball player. We started dating. I was a virgin. We had sex. And the very first time, I kid you not, the very first time we had sex, I got pregnant. I was 16 years old. I will never forget. It was in the boys' dormitory. I was being fast. And shortly thereafter, I started noticing changes in my body. I talked to a couple of friends, and there was even another basketball player who was a friend of my then boyfriend, who told me, he said, "Don't you know how fertile you are being a virgin?" And so I quickly realized that I was pregnant, scared, and did not know what to do. So back then, we knew somebody in school that knew how to make fake IDs. So I had a fake ID because how else was I going to get into the clubs? Because I was going to the clubs at that time. So I had a fake ID, and so I took that fake ID and I went to a clinic in Montgomery, Alabama with my fake ID saying that I was of age to have an abortion, because I was not going to tell my parents. That was just not happening. I was too young. I was too afraid. I had done so well up until that point. I was a good girl. And so I couldn't tell my parents. So here I am in Montgomery, Alabama, 16 years old, presenting myself to be 21. I think it was I think the ID had me as I was 18 or older. I don't remember. Got the hospital, the little gown on. They take me in the back room. They took my blood, getting ready to run some tests. I'm sitting in the back waiting now for them to come and do the procedure. The nurse comes in and tells me, I think it was the nurse, might have been the doctor, comes in and tells me that they cannot perform this abortion because my blood count was too low. So let me just adjust my phone here because it looks like it wants to slip off of the holder. So, to my disappointment, because here I am afraid to tell my parents, I was told to go home, eat lots of oranges to get your iron up, and that would get your blood count up, and come back. Well, by the time I got back to campus, it was pretty much common knowledge by my roommate and some others what I was getting ready to do. So they took it upon themselves to call my parents and tell my parents that I had already had an abortion, which I didn't have. So by this point, I have to bite the bullet now, and I have to talk to my parents and let them know what's going on. And so I explained to them, yes, I did go to have this abortion. No, I didn't have it. That was the hardest thing for me to do, to tell my parents that little Cammie, little good girl Cammie, had been having sex and now she was pregnant. Well, that was pain, okay? That was a painful situation. But in that painful situation, God showed me favor and He intervened. Because had He not intervened, I would not have my daughter today. And so at 16, I was pregnant. There was talk of me dropping out of school because I was pregnant, but I convinced my parents to let me go back to school and finish because I was almost done. It was only a 2-year college. Let me go back. So I went back to school pregnant, and I managed to graduate as valedictorian. So I graduated as valedictorian with my baby in my stomach. And at 17, I had my oldest daughter, who is alive and well today. She's 30 years old, has my second granddaughter. So at that time, 17, I had my first daughter. So now we have my husband's mother, which at the time we were still boyfriend, girlfriend, pressuring us because she's saying we're living with her. And she's saying the church is talking because we living up under her roof, shacking. We ain't married and we living up under her roof. So now she's saying, y'all need to get married. Y'all need to decide what y'all going to do. And she's telling me, don't go get a place with him because if you get a place with him, he will never marry you. So young, immature, and scared, we did it. We got married. So at 18, I was a new mother and a new wife, and I didn't know what the world I was doing. But God had a purpose in all of this. God had a purpose in all of this. Because you see, what I didn't realize then is what I realized several years ago, is that my husband's mother played a role in my salvation. Because of her, I came to Christ and I turned my life over to God, and she played a pivotal role in that. So even in those painful situations of being a teenage mother, of being a teenage wife, of marrying, we had no strong financial structure. We struggled for years. And then even before we actually got married, I was pregnant again with my second daughter. And so we were trying to rush the marriage along because of that as well. See, because back in those days, you know, these days people have babies with 3, 4, 5 different daddies, and it's just nothing but a thing. But, you know, back then it was a little bit more of, you know, you pregnant, y'all gonna make a commitment, you know. And so even though we did love each other, we had already talked about marriage, even as young as we were talking about marriage in college. So, you know, during all of this time, I was just feeling my way around life, not really knowing much of anything. My husband and I fought a lot. We didn't get along very well because we were young, we were growing. We didn't really know how to treat each other, you know. We knew that we loved each other, but we both had tempers. He had a temper and I had a temper, and we clashed a lot, you know. So even through all of that, I think about how at 15, I left home. 16, before I got pregnant, I was already a published writer. I wrote for a local magazine. 17, I was graduating with my valedictorian. 18, I was a wife. And now at 21, I had 3 daughters. I had already had all 3 of my daughters at 21, and that was it. We didn't have any more children. For those of you who know me, you know this. So at 21, I was afraid that we were going to keep getting pregnant, and I didn't want to have any more children, and I told the doctor to take care of that, and he took care of that. So I wasn't able to have any more children after that. Lo and behold, in my late 30s or mid 30s, I started getting baby fever, something serious. I mean, I would be in Walmart through the baby aisle looking at the baby stuff, and I wanted a baby. However, at 39, my middle daughter got pregnant, and so I was not happy about that, because here she was at 19, and I did not want that for any of my girls, to be a teenage mother like I was. But she was 19 and she got pregnant, and so therefore right at 40 I became a grandmother. And somewhere along the way, during the time between me having all of my daughters, I would say right at 29 is when I became part of a very strict holiness church. And this holiness church would change my life. This is where I found God. This is where I gave my life over to Christ. However, during the time, we were so part of a deep religious organization that I became very, very legalistic. I became very judgmental. And so this also put strain on my marriage. And after being a part of that church, when we moved from Alabama into the North Georgia area, is when I left officially the church in Alabama, but the church at that time had split. And so needless to say, I had been a part of this very strict church for about maybe 10 to 11 years. And during that time, it really was challenging for me, because I was never fully sold on a lot of the things that they believed, which was that women could not wear makeup, could not wear jewelry, could not wear pants. Didn't really think women should wear like extensions in their hair. We just were supposed to be plain and covered up from head to toe. And so for many years, I was stuck in a legalistic box, and I judged anybody that did not look like me. I judged them as not being saved. And so that stole 10 years of my life. I kept my children out of church during critical years of their life, which was them going into being young adults and preteens and going into young adults. And so I feel like I robbed them of that until I broke free from that. And I realized that, whom the Son sets free is free indeed, and that we should not be entangled in yokes and be bound up by rules and religion, and that Christ was so much bigger than that. And it was all about my personal walk, my personal relationship, my personal convictions, and not necessarily a set standard that man put over me. So even though I found salvation in the original holiness church, and then the church split, and some of us followed the pastor's daughter, and we became very much obsessed with her, to the point that we looked at her, put her on a pedestal. I could speak personally for myself that I had put her on a pedestal, and I looked at her as somebody had more touch with God than I did. And so I looked to her to be my counsel, my guide, my spiritual advisor, my confidant. And so when that church dismantled because she stepped down, it broke my heart and it broke my spirit. So during all of this time, my marriage is pretty much, hanging on by a thread because my husband is living his life and I'm living this strict religious life, which I can't really do much of anything. And so during this time, which I would consider that a painful time, because even though I found Christ, I didn't know how to have relationship with him. All I knew how to do was to follow religion and be religious. So this was painful because on the inside, even though I had this facade of wearing certain clothes and looking plain and trying to look holy, I was dying on the inside. On the inside, I was miserable. I was rotting on the inside because on the inside I was judgmental. I was just very critical and very stuck in a box. And so, God still favored me because through all of that, my marriage is still holding on just as strong as ever today, almost 30 years of marriage. And so that is definitely God's favor. I look at my testimony and I think about that. Had it not been for my husband's mother, she played that role, and she was kind of the one that was leading all of us to Christ because we were following her going to the Holiness Church. And she was very, very spiritual, and we had a great relationship. And I miss her today because I could talk to her about any and everything. She even told me at one time, I was just like, it was just like I came from her womb. We had such a connection, and we were so close. And, I think about my daughters today and how I have 3 beautiful daughters. I have 4 grandchildren, beautiful grandchildren. My marriage is strong. I've been able to accomplish much, even though my life started early, even though I was a teenage mother. I'm a published author. I co-wrote a book on last year. It's called Rebranding My Life. The book was not a big success, but it was a great experience for me, simply because I wanted to get out how I had gone through that religious experience. And so I co-wrote the book with 4 other women who were telling their stories of how they went through traumatic events in life and how they were able to rebrand my life, mind, body, and spirit. And mine was definitely about the spirit. I think about the accomplishments that I have had in my life and how on every job God favored me. On every job I have had management role where I have not even had any experience, and I was given the opportunity to manage a home care office. I had 0 experience. I did not know anything. I was a blank slate. The only thing they knew was that I came from corporate, and they were willing to give me a chance. But I look at it as God's favor, because even though I walked into a mess of an office, in 1 year, I was able to, with the help of my assistants, turn that office around. I look at how God favors me on every job I go on. The job that I am on now, when they had me on temporary status, they told me there was a freeze on hiring, and I told them I could not depend on that. And as soon as I said that, the manager pretty much pull whatever string he could get to get me hired on, and within less than a month I was hired on, making more money than I had ever made. And to this day, I have a great manager. He's very good to work with, and God just favors me on every job. Even when I was working for a hateful boss several years ago, she was really, really hateful. I worked with this lady for 5 years, and from day one, I realized that something was wrong with her, and I didn't understand what was wrong with her. But even with her, God even gave me favor, and there were times when she would let me know that, listen, I know you do your job, and I'm not worried about you. So when I'm in the meetings and I'm talking about this, that, and the other, I'm not talking to you because you're doing your job. And even though she still had funny ways, and there were things that she would do that would make me really upset during that time, that, God still gave me favor even with her. Even in the home care office, which was my worst job to date, I hated that job. Even though it was a management role, I hated it because the administrator, I couldn't trust her, and the clinical director, she was just evil and conniving, and she just wanted to make my life a living hell, and she tried her best to do that. And so I remember putting in my resignation on that job, not really knowing where I was going. But as soon as I did, I was offered a position back at our corporate office with the hateful boss that I worked with for 5 years, incidentally. But I didn't have to lose employment. Last year, I left my job of 15 years. I had been on that job, and I did not know where in the world I was going, but I knew I wanted something different. And in 3 weeks, I had 3 offers on the table, putting in my I gave them a month's notice, and I never did start looking until my last week of employment. And in 3 weeks, I had 3 offers on the table. So don't tell me that God does not favor his own. I know that I am favored by God. And I can go on and on and on about different situations where debts have been, just wiped clean, where God has had my back in different situations. And so when I talk about purpose, even though all of those things happen to me early in life that were painful to go through, God had a purpose in all of that. He has taught me so much along the way. And now I have a beautiful marriage. I love my husband. I know he loves me. We still have spits and spats. I mean, we're married, and if you're married and you don't ever argue with your spouse, then something is wrong, because you're not going to always see eye to eye. That's just the bottom line. However, our marriage is stronger than ever. And I just thank God for every painful situation. I thank him for my purpose in life. I even thank him for more recently having the courage to create a devotional called Motivational Moment. And I was pretty much sparked to do that by Dr. Miles Monroe, listening to some of his teachings and him talking about the gifts that each of us have. And I know that I have a writing gift, so I wanted to go ahead and make sure that God is getting the glory out of that gift. And so I started the Motivational Moment segment, which is here on my channel. It used to be 5 days a week. Now I release those twice a week, Mondays and Wednesdays. And it's just something to encourage people. I've had people come to me and tell me they needed to hear this for that day, or how that really spoke to them. And I'm just thankful for that, because that's what I want. I want God to use me. And so I want you to pray for me. I want you to keep me in your prayers as I'm continuing on this journey. I heard a reporter say one time, it was Bill O'Reilly on Fox News. He said, if you're a teenage mother, if you were a teenage mother, you can't expect to do too well in life, blah, 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 blah. And I said, you know what? Ever since I heard that, I made up in my mind that I'm going to prove, even if he never knows, I'm proving him wrong. I'm going to prove him wrong by proving to myself that just because you are a teenage mother, just because you make mistakes in life, just because you've had some pitfalls in your life, does not mean that you can't excel in life. It does not mean that, And so continue to pray for me. I just wanted to share some of my story with you. There's so much more that God has brought me through. I could have dug deeper into even that situation. But if you want to learn more about my story and me breaking the bondage of religion and legalism, that is part of the book compilation, which, like I said, I was a part of, called Rebranding My Life. I will leave a link in the description box if you so desire to purchase a book. But thanks for listening to my story. If you're not a subscriber to my channel, please go ahead and subscribe to my channel. Remember, if you do subscribe, to hit the notification bell. And I appreciate you watching. God bless.